You're listening to Swipe East, Swipe West, where we dive into the dating differences from coast to coast. I'm your host, Ashley Davis. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Swipe East, Swipe West, the dating and culture podcast focusing on differences from coast to coast. I'm your host, Ashley, and you can find us on Instagram at Swipe East, Swipe West, and me on TikTok at Ashley Angora. That's Ashley, Angora. For anyone that's new here, welcome. And for everyone that's returning, thank you for joining us again. I am recording this at 12:35 a.m., right before a flight. Well, not exactly right before, but I am flying out in a few hours back to Philly for a work trip and a DJ gig that I have scheduled. So by the time this is posted, I will be in Philly. So I'm trying to get things done a bit earlier for you because I can't bring my mic with me. I could, but I probably wouldn't have time to record this, to be quite honest with you. But because I'm recording this early, I gotta say, I really don't have any more dating updates for you. Just like last time, I've been insanely busy just with podcasts, DJ stuff, life. I cannot get over that it's April already. Like, that is insane to me. I feel like everything's just going by so fast. I just think of that Ferris Bueller quote. I actually drove by last weekend with my friend, the house that they filmed, or at least the outside of, which, fun fact, is in Long Beach. But yeah, I feel like the next few months are just going to be insane. I have wedding things happening, Coachella happening, just a lot going on. So it's definitely going to be another busy summer. But again, because I have no updates, we can just dive into the episode this week. I am so excited for this episode, and I hope that you all listening will find it just as intriguing and entertaining as I did, because this week I have my friend on. She is using a pseudonym for privacy reasons, but we are talking all about senior home living and dating and hookups and relationships and marriages and second marriages and all that fun stuff. So my friend that I'm interviewing has worked in senior home living facilities since pretty much she graduated college and in different capacities. So she has really gotten to know all of her residents. And I think why this is an important episode and something that was interesting to me, not only from like the dating aspect, is the concept of age in dating. Obviously, this episode is going to have a little bit of a different angle because it's talking specifically about senior home living. And on top of that, senior home living in facilities that do focus more on healthcare versus, and we talk a little bit about this in the episode, like a facility, maybe like a retirement center in like a Florida, for example. So it is a little bit of a different viewpoint throughout the episode, so definitely keep that in mind. But in society in general, ageism is very real. And I feel like when you think about older people and relationships, there's definitely some stereotypes there and kind of different ways of thinking around it, at least for most people. So when my friend, the reason I had her on was just, she would talk to me about, things that would happen in the center. And I was like shocked by it. But then when you kind of think about it, like they're still people. It's just they're a little bit older. So why wouldn't they want to engage in a relationship with someone else and things like that? So we definitely dive deeper into that in the episode. I don't want to give too much away, but just some things to keep in mind while you listen through. And again, I think it's just interesting because you have shows popping up now like Grace and Frankie and other shows that do highlight older people and like their lives and, dating and remarrying and things like that. And it's not something that's really talked about. So it was just kind of interesting to think about it and have an open conversation because it's not really talked about that often. So anyways, I really enjoyed talking to my friend about it. It made me think about things a little bit differently and also feel less concerned for when I'm 87 and still single and on the prowl, most likely based on how things are going for me. So hope you all enjoy and let's dive into it. I'm here with my good friend, Allie. How are you doing this fine evening?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited to talk to you about senior home living and dating. I'm like so intrigued by this.
Yes. It's very intriguing and a little graphic sometimes.
Would you say it gets a little graphic?
Can.
Oh my gosh. All right. So to kick it off, I would love to hear kind of like the lay of the land of the senior home living environment in terms of just like what your role is there, how I guess like how things are set up, like just in general speaking like and how people can even be dating there. More so just for my own future because that's where I see myself going.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
give us the deets.
for sure. So, I mean, if you think about it, it's basically an apartment complex for people over 65. That's a really simple way to put it. Healthcare is provided there. Now, most people over 65 don't need to be in an assisted living place until you get much older. So I would say the average resident is in their 80s. But we do have a lot more young residents that we're starting to see, especially since COVID. A lot of people in their 70s. You occasionally get the people in their 60s who do move in. The last community that I worked at, we had a lot of very young people in their 70s and 60s, which made it really interesting, which is where most of these dating stories actually come from. But it's definitely like going back to college. I would say I compare it a lot to being back in a dorm setting because it's all communal. So you're having meals with your neighbors, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Their world is a bit smaller maybe than ours just because they're not able to just get out and hop in their car and go drive. Some of them do have cars, but their life is basically all within the community. So that's one aspect that it's different than an apartment complex. And when I started in senior living, I was doing the activities role. So I was the person in charge of making it fun, which is honestly a hoot and was a very, for a 22-year-old just graduating from college, starting a job, it was extremely fulfilling. And I had a lot of energy to do that. Of course, I'm kind of moved on from the activities part of it now, but that's where so much of the relationships that I built with them and found out about, they would confide all these things to me, or I would see things happen in activities, even little love triangles. So having to like be in breakup love triangles sometimes. So
Oh my God.
that's how I got started. And yeah.
I can definitely see, and I don't know why I didn't, I guess like in my head, I imagine like a senior home living, like much older, just from like, my great grandparents were in senior home living, like 90 pushing 100, but I can definitely see where you're like in your 60s or 70s, like maybe fresh off retirement, maybe looking to spice up your life. Like you're kind of looking to fill the void of not working like all day, every day, where maybe you would be getting in some of that, like find some drama in your life. I don't know. So I guess that makes a little bit more sense to me.
Definitely. I would say the social aspect of it is why people opt for it in the first place. If you think about it, why would you want to move from your home if you can have a caregiver, if it's care that you need, which is most of it. Most people move in because they need more care. They're either physically or cognitively, dementia is a huge population. Part of the senior living community population. So, but you can always pay caregivers to come, to your home. So a lot of people choose it for the social aspect. So it really does feel a lot like a second, college dorm later in life. It's very similar dynamics that I think end up happening.
So to that point, then are they like, if you can share this, are they they're choosing to go? Like it isn't like their family, or is it like having them go, or is it like a mix of both?
It's a mix of both for sure. And I would say in my experience, most people don't necessarily want to. I don't know if I'd say most, but I've met a lot of people that have really great attitudes about it. We do, get people who are upset they don't want to be here. They don't understand, why their families are wanting them to do this. And that a lot of times is more people who have dementia, and they don't. When you have dementia, a lot of times there's not a knowing that you do. So you don't understand why you would need to be in a place like this. So it might be brought to them as like, oh, you're going to stay in this nice hotel. This is like a resort, and, your house is under construction. And so we need you to stay here for a couple of weeks. And then those couple of weeks just don't ever end, which, in terms of the ethics of all of that, I'm sure that's a conversation for another time. But we just kind of let the families make that decision. That's a very personal decision to make. But I would say it's a mix. And generally, people end up adjusting very well. I don't know that I've ever met anybody who never adjusted and ended up, enjoying themselves. So,
yeah. And I'm sure, to your point before, the social aspect helps play into that. Like, they're not like completely isolated in their room.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
So tell me about the dating that happens. Like, how are these like relationships like even happening? Like, how do they?
Right. Yeah, I know. So I can remember hearing in college before I before I was working professionally, when I was interning, I can remember hearing somebody say like, oh, one of the, most common places that STDs are spread are in these senior living homes. And I thought, there's no way that's true. Well, what are these senior living, places like? Just basically these giant sex clubs? What are they all like, getting freaky or something? And, I still, after about a decade in the industry, don't really think that there's any way that this is one of like the top places. Maybe those 55 and up communities that you hear about in like Florida and Arizona, places like Leisure World or something like that. Because that's more 55 and up. So they're a lot more active and have their own, independent lives. It's not so much healthcare. But I guess my first experience with it was actually about a week into my first job. And I was working in Texas, and it was a couple who I did not necessarily know were a couple. I was still getting to know everyone. And I was trying to go around and get everybody to bingo. They'd given me a list of apartment numbers to go knock on doors, say, hey, everybody come to bingo. And I'm this young, 22, like brand new. I'm going to get everybody, out and active. And I'm knocking on doors, and I knock on this one door, and the lady says, come in. And I open the door, and she's just there, butt naked, sitting in her chair with her newspaper out. And her boyfriend, who is this other resident, just is walking across the room. He's butt naked too. I'm just like, oh, hey guys, I was just coming in to, tell you about bingo. And they're like, yeah, we'll be down. Is it starting now? I'm like, yeah, it's going to be starting about 15 minutes. They're like, yeah, we'll meet you down there. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And I thought I should tell somebody, like, surely this isn't, initially I'm thinking like, this is probably not allowed. Like, I need to probably tell the nurse. So I go and I tell the nurse like, oh, by the way, I'll just use, for HIPAA reasons, I'll say it's Bob and Betty. I'm like, Bob is in Betty's room, and they're naked, and I don't know what to do. And the nurse is like, oh yeah, they're dating, that their little boyfriend and girlfriend. I'm like, oh, so that's like, it's okay. And they're like, oh yeah, they're fine. Yeah, let them know it's time for bingo. And I was like, okay. I think that was my first, kind of shifted my mind into thinking like, these are adults, right?
Mm-hmm.
They've lived sometimes four times longer than, at that time I was only 22, and these people were, 88. The lady actually was in her late 80s, and the gentleman was in his late 70s. So, they'd lived so much longer than me. Well, who am I to sit here and think they can't make decisions about their sex lives, So it was nice that early on in my career, I was able to kind of have that shift, because I still meet people to this day, especially caregivers, who want to keep them apart. Like, oh, they shouldn't be doing this. They shouldn't, be doing this. And it's like, no, they're able to make their own decisions. They're adults. We actually can't keep them from having sex lives. That's their right. As part of living in these homes, we can't intervene unless basically a doctor says somebody's not healthy enough for sex. And of course, the topic of dementia can start to come into play. And, what does consent look like when you have something like Alzheimer's disease? But even so, if two people want to have a relationship, that's their right. So that was my first, Bob and Betty. That was my first. encounter, and I just saw it all, and will probably have that image in my head for the rest of my life until I'm 88.
I can't believe how nonchalant they were, just like
Yeah,
they're
just
butt
come on
naked and
in.
they're like, oh, come in. Yeah.
Oh
Oh
yeah,
my
just
God.
come on in.
Yeah.
You can't move too fast at that age. So I mean, I could hear
Yes.
them in the room, and they weren't actively doing anything. She was just like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
come on.
She had the newspaper to hide herself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense because, and that was going to be my question, or I guess my thought is I could see where maybe people might be coming at it from, like, they're thinking in their head, like, senior living, people are there because they have like a problem, because they can't care for themselves, which therefore means they can't make decisions for themselves, which isn't necessarily true. Like, you could be a full functioning adult, but to your point, maybe you need a little extra help, like walking to get food. Like, I don't know, like that's like just an example, but that doesn't mean that you can't then choose to be in a relationship, because if you weren't in that home trying to function on your own, you would still be living like the most normal life you could be in that regard, at least just in a different environment.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it's something that I do an annual training with all of the staff on, just getting them comfortable. I mean, it's not really comfortable for people in general to talk about sex, which is interesting. No matter the demographic, people, it's a taboo subject, but especially when you're talking about seniors, I think it's easier sometimes for healthcare. We can look at it more objective. This is not our mom, our dad. I can tell you, having these conversations with family members is very different. And often much harder. I have had to tell family members that I am really sorry, but there's basically nothing I can do. I cannot physically keep your loved one from doing this. We're not a psychiatric facility, so we can't restrain people physically. So there's really nothing I can do other than try to distract them and, give them other activities to do. But certainly, I think it's probably harder to have conversations with the adult children of these seniors than it is, the caregivers get it after. Basically, they just need permission. They don't want to get in trouble for letting something happen. And really, like I said, the only reason we wouldn't allow people to be in a room together is if somebody had, like, let's say a heart condition and their doctor says, oh, this person's heart isn't healthy enough for sex. It could put them into cardiac arrest, something like that. Or if, cognitively, somebody, had dementia and was clearly feeling fearful of the other person, or didn't, if you could kind of gauge that, or if they were verbally stating, I don't want to be around this person, then of course we would protect that person. But if everybody is healthy and, clearly enjoying themselves, there's really, that's totally their right. And who are we? At that age, any joy that you can derive, I say, go for it.
Yeah. So are they kind of like starting these relationships like through activities? Is it all people like within the same senior living home? Are people on the apps there?
I did have one resident who was on, I don't know if it was, I think it was eHarmony, and he ended up moving out. So he was actually on eHarmony and bringing women to the community, going out on dates, having women come back to the community, but his room was a mess. So I think what was happening was when these women were coming back, he was living in it's so expensive to live. That's the other thing. People don't really move in until they need it, because it's very expensive to live there. Even in places that aren't super nice, they're still very expensive because it's healthcare technically. It's a healthcare community, even for those that aren't receiving a ton of care. So these rooms are often smaller. So this guy was living in a studio apartment and bringing back these women. And, finally did meet a woman who was living in Orange County, and this guy was up in like Los Angeles driving to Orange County. Well, he shouldn't have been driving. I think his daughter had attempted to take away the keys from him. So he ended up actually falling in love and moving in with his girlfriend in Orange County. But other than that, the relationships that I've seen are just within the community. It's people who meet there. Often it's widows, widowers. Every now and then it's singles, but most people have already been married once or a handful of times. A lot of the men have had like multiple marriages and the women have been, are widows or something like that. So we definitely see that kind of that second and third love.
Do they remarry ever in the homes and then like move out?
They don't move out. And the ones that I've seen, we have had, so not at a community I worked at, but one of my company's sister communities up in Chicago had a couple who met and fell in love and they got married. Another couple in Austin, also at a different community, not one that I worked at, got married, met at, the community and got married. So it does happen. And they often have their weddings there at the community. It's definitely a generation that felt very strongly about marriage.
Mm-hmm.
So what we'll see is they'll be living in separate rooms and then they'll want to, move into a single room because you're going to save on rent. But they'll want to get married first before they live together. That's like a big thing for this generation.
Yeah.
They're still very, those,
old school thinking.
Those values are important to them. Old school. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I would say that there was a situation where I had a resident who both residents had dementia. And this was something that the family was very fearful of because they were talking about marriage. And we were just kind of like, oh, yeah, that's so great. Good for you. We would never tell them like, oh, no, you guys can't get married. First of all, they're not children. Second of all, if we did, they're going to probably be unhappy there and try to bust out or something. And both were in a secured, locked, memory care unit. And so the daughter of one of them was just so anxious, like, mom's talking about getting married. What is this going to mean for, kind of, I think it was coming down to a financial thing. Could this new person, be entitled to any of her money? And her husband, this person's dad had, passed away not that long ago. But mom has dementia and I think was just like happy to have a companion. So, again, a generation that talks about marriage. And it took a lot of talking with this daughter to get her to understand that like they were safe. They're not actually going to get married, but why would we not let them think that or, even have a pretend wedding ceremony if we need to, but it's not anything legal or binding. It's not like we would have a priest or a marriage license or anything like that. Just more so to let them. I mean, the gentleman had his son buy an engagement ring, so and the woman wore it. It was really sweet. But again, it was more the family, the woman's family, who was really, really freaked out about it. So, I've seen that happen too. In general, it doesn't always. I would say it results in marriage not that often, but they end up being companions for, as long as they're there in the community, which is a really nice thing to have, I think.
Why do you think, aside from, some of those like situations with like dementia or things like that, do you think the families are so against it? Do you think it's like a control thing because they're not there? Or
so given the background, what I have noticed is that generally it's the daughters of moms that have the hardest time with it. I have had, probably 8 couples that I can think of off the top of my head that ended up forming. And the only family members that I've really ever had to deal with and like talk through things with have been the daughters of women. And they've always said like, my dad was the love of my mom's life. How could she, she does this, this couldn't truly mean anything. My dad was the love of her life. So I think it has more to do with whatever idea they had of their parents' relationship being so perfect, that, I think that's something that it's hard for people to understand, that a relationship can exist independent of, like love can happen twice, right? It doesn't mean that the first relationship was any less perfect, but that person's gone now. And so this new love is formed. And I think often people who have like really strong, genuine love probably find it easier to embrace love again, and probably want that and yearn for that a little more than people who are a little bit more content, being on their own or being independent. I think it definitely has a lot more to do with our personalities or just our own, I don't know, like openness to love than anything else, really.
It sounds like it's less about things happening specifically in the living home and just in general, like regardless of where they were living, just finding someone new again, replacing their dad, which would happen either way, potentially.
Yeah, I will say that the relationships happen quickly. It's so interesting. Like, we're the generation of you have to be, first you're like texting for 6 months, then you're talking for 6 months, then you're finally like, exclusive. And then you can call each other boyfriend, girlfriend after 2.5 years or whatever. It just seems like it's a generation where everything moves so slow. I'm telling you, these people meet, and by the end of the week, they're like, this is my boyfriend, this is my boyfriend, Jimmy. And you're like, okay.
I think age does have to do with it in that regard and I think part of it is generational because I feel like the older we get, speaking for myself as someone single, like I feel like the older I've gotten, when I do meet guys that are older that are secure, emotionally intelligent, or emotionally mature, and they do want a relationship, I feel like if they meet someone and they're like, okay, like I want to date someone seriously and I am interested in a relationship, like within 5 to 6 dates, it's like, let's make this official or let's just move on. And even like when my mom, and like thinking about my parents, my mom and my dad got married when my mom was 31. My dad was 34, 35. Or no, she was 28 and he was 32. Sorry. And they met, engaged within 6 months, like married within a year. And like, that was like not that weird. Whereas like that would be kind of weird at that age today. And so thinking of even that,
absolutely.
Yeah. So thinking that generation, even older, I'm like, and also like, given, if you're like 80, not to be like, a downer, but you don't know how much time you have left. So it's kind of like, what do you have to lose? Like,
yeah. And I've seen some pretty odd couples where like, well, I would, I think to myself, I wonder how that works. Like, I wonder, some of them are more apparent, but like I said, they're all around each other every day. And I'm telling you, I mean, there's cliques, there's reputations. Like there was a gentleman who lived at one of the communities who was in a wheelchair, had Parkinson's disease, but highly motivated to have a girlfriend. I mean, wanted me to plan. Can you plan mixers with other senior living communities? Can we do like, speed dating? He wanted to do a speed dating night. He was so motivated. Any new woman who moved in, he was, can I have lunch with you? Can I sit with you at dinner? And finally, this woman moved in, much younger, really beautiful, beautiful woman. And I saw him. I was like, oh, I knew exactly. Let's call him Rob. I was like, Rob's definitely going to go for her. And Rob did go for her. And she just immediately was like, oh, yeah, like, went for it. And they have been together ever since. I think they've been together for a couple of years now.
Wow.
And she takes him around in his wheelchair. Actually, that's kind of a funny, interesting story. So when they were first hooking up, and I do mean hooking up, the staff were finding them, like in the room. Or she would sneak in the night and then kind of sneak back. They lived on the same hallway. She would sneak in the night. They would clearly have been together. But this is a gentleman who, due to his Parkinson's, is a major fall risk, meaning like if he tries to stand up, he can easily fall. He's very, very weak. His Parkinson's has pretty much progressed. So he, doesn't have a ton of dexterity. He can't, use his hands super well. He can't walk. And this is a woman who was young and very physically able. And so I think the first time that people fell out is because she had to get a caregiver. Well, we had suspicions because one of her shirts, a caregiver found her shirt in his room. They're like, maybe it got mixed up in the laundry. But then she had to come out and get a caregiver because in the act, he had slipped and she wasn't strong enough to like lift him back up into the bed. So then we were like, okay, well, clearly we know what's going on now. And, but they're super cute. Like when we would have dances or little, parties and events where there's a DJ or a band, they're always, she's spinning him around in the wheelchair. There's, he's standing and they're just kind of holding each other and dancing. He even started going to physical therapy to be able to stand for her, which I thought was really sweet. But the reason I started the story was because so he actually ended up getting a procedure, an elective surgery, which not a ton of people getting elective surgeries. And it was so that he would be able to have an erection. So once this relationship formed, because they were trying, but due to his Parkinson's and he had been taking supplements. And so he actually had a procedure. And our caregivers had to help, with the wound care and stuff afterwards. And his doctor basically told, the nurses, as part of his medical care after this procedure, he cannot have sex for, I can't remember how long, maybe it was a couple of weeks. And so during that time, they didn't see each other, and he had gotten a little weaker just because anytime you have a procedure, you're going to go, I don't know if he had to have anesthesia or something like that, but it just can take it out of you. Anytime you have to be in the hospital at that age can take a toll on your body. So he got much weaker and he really couldn't stand. And so we had to have a conversation with him about safety with both of them. Look, it's just not super safe for you guys to be attempting to have sex right now. Rob has doctor's orders stating that he, can't have sex right now, but also he's just too weak. He can't stand up and it's not safe for you. We've already had to come pick him up one time off the floor. It's not safe for you. So until something changes, and that's when the whole physical therapy thing started, we're going to need to just hold off, do other things. You guys can do other things in your rooms. Just don't have to have, I guess, the penetration part of it. And so this gentleman requested that since he wasn't able to stand, when he isn't able to stand in the shower, it's our caregivers who help him stand in the shower, help to give a shower. So his thought process was, well, if you guys can help me in the shower, why can't you help me have sex? Can you guys be in the room and physically hold me up or help me get into position? And we were like, well, no,
Oh my God.
That's not a service that we provide. And I can remember having to actually reach out to what, when you're in healthcare, they call it the ombudsman, who's they're essentially, they work for the state, and they are the residents advocate. They make sure that these senior living homes are not, abusing residents, that they're not taking, advantage of them or, whatever it is. So we even had to reach out to say can we deny him this care? And they had actually not ever had the request either. So it was a very interesting situation. And thankfully, he just kind of let it go before it, got too crazy. But yeah, he wanted somebody to come in there and help him. He's like, I don't understand why you guys can't help me with this if you can help me with it while I'm in the shower. But it was basically a privacy right for the other resident was kind of what it boiled down to, that person probably didn't want somebody else in there while you guys were having sex. So that was one of the more extreme requests I'd ever received.
That is, I don't think I could have done that. I would have been so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's very different from helping someone clean themselves innocently.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of times the caregivers will tell me stories about how, these are older gentlemen. And when you're giving them a shower, it's not very uncommon for somebody to get an erection. It's not even necessarily sexual. It's just that, you're naked and here's this person cleaning you up. And sometimes you just get an erection. Yeah. And so that's common, but this was very different, that he was really taking it to the next level. Yeah. So we had to give him, kudos for trying, can't blame a guy for trying, for sure.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So aside from that couple, and hooking up in rooms, how, what type of dates, would people go on, or were they even going on dates at that point? Were they just hanging out?
Most of them are just hanging out, but that couple in particular does go on dates. They've even done weekends, they'll go away for the weekend, and that's usually, it has to be done through their family. We as the community, first we have to have, their physician's paperwork has to say that they're able to leave the community unassisted. But they'll call an Uber and they'll book a hotel room and they'll go, to Santa Barbara or wherever for the weekend. And they do typically have to hire a private, because the gentleman needed so much physical assistance, he would hire a private caregiver to go with them to provide care while they were on the trip. Often their families will take them out, is what I've noticed. A lot of families do get on board with it. Like I said, there's a handful of, family members who get weird about it, but majority are pretty supportive of it and can understand the benefit of having a companion at this point in life. And we'll take them out. I've seen them spend, holidays together. I even had in one of the memory care communities I was working at in Texas, where this woman was living there and her husband had passed away. And she was so sure that this other gentleman was her husband. And the other gentleman was really, really far progressed. He couldn't speak anymore. Sorry, I'm trying not to use too many medical terms or anything like that, but he couldn't speak. He was very much wheelchair bound. And so this woman would go sit by him and hold his hand and just say her husband's name to him over and over. And, he just kind of didn't respond, but she wasn't really with it enough to be able to recognize that he wasn't responding. So in her mind, that was her husband. Well, this gentleman's wife was a much younger woman who would come in and was so sweet to the other lady. And even during Christmas or Thanksgiving dinners, would have her sit with them at the table and let this other woman sit by her husband. And
wow.
And the daughter, everybody just included her as part of the family because, what was it? What did it hurt? So I would say in general, people were very embracing and, to have a wife come in and let this other woman, be thinking that her husband is her husband. I thought that was a really special moment. I've had scenarios where a couple happens and the wife doesn't, in this situation, this gentleman's wife was young and healthy and lived outside of the community. He was in memory care and this other lady and him struck up a relationship and, we're always holding hands and holding other body parts of each other. And when the wife would come in for visits, we would have to separate them because she was very upset, felt like she was being cheated on. Obviously, I think that would be a really hard thing to see because their relationship had been so good. And this guy was like the mayor of the town. So he was like a well-known guy and she was the mayor's wife. And so, that's a tough thing. And they were always known for having this great relationship. And here he is in this memory care community. And now he's got this, girlfriend. And so, that was a situation where basically we agreed to like a don't ask, don't tell. So, we couldn't really separate them. But when his wife came in for visits, we would make sure that we were distracting the girlfriend and like doing something else, doing an activity with her or taking her out for a walk. So, it doesn't always happen that the other spouse is dead. That's, I would say the cognitive is where, people with the cognitive issues, that's where situations like that happen because they're there and, they know they have a wife. So why not this person be their wife? So, they're just looking for some companionship.
Glad to hear the drama doesn't stop even when you're in your 80s.
No, it never stops. It never stops. It just takes on a different form.
So what has been, I guess, like your favorite thing that you've seen or that you've learned through that experience? Like to me, it sounds a lot like college or high school, but on steroids, just because things like happen so fast and you're older, you have it sounds like they have they have the money at that point to, go off and do things if they're able to as well. So it is kind of like a full on relationship, but.
Yeah, I would say it's like college or high school on like arthritis medication more than steroids. It's not, because it is, again, it's pretty, a lot of it's pretty sweet. It's a lot of, kissing and holding hands and saving a seat at the bingo table or, oh, no, he sits next to me in the dining room kind of a thing, versus there's not been a ton. There was only 2 love triangles that I can really think of. And one was a dementia situation where this guy just, I think he potentially thought both of these women were the same person, actually. And they would kind of get a little like mad at each other, like vying over who could sit by him and stuff. But that fizzled out pretty quickly, and it kind of, turned into the other lady just getting distracted and not caring anymore. So, and then I had another love triangle. It had nothing to do with dementia, but just, people getting a little catty, and it had to do with like sitting in the dining room together too. That seems to be a weird, like a recurring pattern about like they hook up in the dining room, like they start sitting with each other in the dining room, and that's how like that they're together, kind of a thing. But I think probably the thing that's been coolest to see is just that people's personalities really don't change. I think libido in general, they find, that age can account for some decline in libido, but there's really not enough research or enough studies on it to say why. I think there's one study, I wrote it down just because I wanted to get it right, is Dr. Cynthia Graham. She's University of Southampton, who studied decline in sex drive. And it says that for men, they do experience a decline between 35 and 44. And for women, it's between 55 and 64. But the research doesn't explain why. It just, shows the correlation. So they say, the theory is that theory, just what's accepted is that libido has a lot more to do, and sex drive has a lot more to do with the individual, your individual sexual experiences, maybe, a little bit due to hormones or a little bit due to things like stress, possibly. But overall, it's really more individual than age related. And, like people kind of stay who they are. We get a lot more firm in our ways, actually, as we age, which can be scary. Can definitely be scary. Like, I hope that I can still evolve, but I know from working with seniors that there's a really good chance that, I am who I am. I think sometimes our opinions can change, but our personalities do pretty much stay the same. And we had this woman I knew in Texas who was fun, and she was a cocktail waitress her whole life at like a really ritzy, uppity spot, and very much was a cocktail waitress till the end. I mean, to the point where we were having a day where they were using the activity room. We had invited a bunch of doctors in from a local hospital, so everything was done up. We were having a symposium, and I was actually speaking about dementia. And this woman walks in, because it's where she normally would have bingo. And she walks in and she sits down on the lap of this doctor. And she's like, honey. And she starts telling him, who her son is and this and that. And I remember when you used to come into the hotel and all this stuff, because she had dementia. And she's sitting on his lap, and he went along with it. And thankfully we all played it off, and everybody was really cordial about it. And we just happened to be talking about dementia, like when it all happened. I'll always remember that moment. But that was just her personality. That's what she would have done when she was younger. She's not going to stop sitting on laps now. I think we have this idea that all old people are like really conservative, but they're definitely not, just like, there's young people our age that are super conservative and, probably will be for the rest of their lives. Old people can be really fun loving and out there too.
That like reminds me of this trend that's on TikTok right now of all the girls dressing their moms like them. Have you seen that?
Yes. I love that trend. It
just like shows, and the reason I'm bringing it up is because it's almost like, to your point, like age is almost like a perception. And like, I think people sometimes like, you like that once you get to a certain age, it's like, oh, you dress like a mom, in quotes, you act like a mom. And it's like these moms just like put on low-rise jeans and a crop, and all of a sudden they were like hot, and like it was like completely different. So I think, and I know it's like a little bit different from like what you were just saying, but it reminded me of it a bit, because it's like this perception of, and I mean, I kind of even said it at the beginning of the call, like, oh, like senior living, older people, like you're old and you dress like a certain way, and you're like tired and whatever. And it's like, no, you can still be like cool and trendy and hip and have a sex life and whatever, no matter where you are. So I think
Yeah.
it is a lot of a perception thing, to your point.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely life is what you make it. And there's certainly, I would say the majority of residents aren't, getting into relationships. We have some people that are super reclusive and don't come out of their rooms and basically only come out for meals, or they don't feel well. It sucks getting older sometimes. It can
Yeah.
physically be really terrible if you've got a condition that causes you to not feel great and you're in pain. You don't always want to go out and be social, but to know that there's opportunities for that, I think is what's cool. And I just think that, it's something that I didn't plan on. I didn't go to college to work in senior living. I just needed a job after I graduated and ended up doing it actually kind of to the like my professors were pretty discouraging of that. They were like, oh, you don't want to work in senior living, being an activities director is like, you don't need a degree to do that. So why would you do that? But I was like, yeah, I know, but I just need a job. So I'm just going to do it for a little bit. And then I ended up, loving it and, moving my career down the path, within the industry, not doing activities anymore, but it's still being around the residents makes it just so much fun. They're hilarious. And they've just lived really cool lives. So I think the opportunity to get their perspective on things, and they're very interested too in young people. Like they want to hear about young people and young people's dating and stuff like that. So it's really interesting. I was a really boring person for them to talk to because, I'm not dating, but been in a relationship for so long, but they always want to ask me about my boyfriend. Oh, so yeah, they're funny. Funny group.
They should come talk to me. I have some stories for them.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. We should get it. We'll get a Q&A one day.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. I always think that some of them probably have way more secrets than they're willing to let on.
Oh, for sure. Every once in a while, like my mom is like super conservative with that kind of stuff. But every once in a while, like a new story will come out of something like that she did as a kid that she never wanted to tell me to like influence me. And I'm like, it's too late. You could just tell me the secrets.
Yeah, exactly.
But
exactly.
So my last question for you, unless you have anything else, is I know you've worked in a few different locations, or you have like their sisters areas. I'm just interested to hear, and the answer might be no, but I'm interested to hear like if you noticed any like differences in general, honestly, like in the homes and like the types of personalities you got, or as well as like with like the dating and relationship scene in the various areas.
Oh, absolutely. A huge difference going from Austin to LA. So in Austin, we had a few couples. That's where a lot of those like marriages happened. It seemed like people were, or I would hear residents kind of have crushes on each other, but they were either, just, oh, well, my husband's dead and he's the last person I would ever, be in a relationship with. However, that is where the people invited me into their room and they were just naked. So that's really interesting. But I don't think that there was as much action as when I moved to LA. And the action definitely, especially when I was working kind of around like the Hollywood area, those residents, they were interesting people. They'd lived very interesting lives, and I'm sure had dated a lot of really interesting people in their life. So it was just like they have just their mindset in general was so much more open, clearly a lot more progressive than the residents in Texas. It was interesting even being able to talk about politics in Hollywood, because in Texas, you just didn't talk about it. They didn't want to talk politics. Like, no, we don't talk about that, but we could have discussions and little debates and stuff in LA. And they were very interested in stuff like that. And there's just a lot more places to go. We would get to go out to a lot more museums and do things that were more social, go out to restaurants. Like they used to love going to El Coyote in Hollywood and like drinking margaritas. And we actually, one thing that happened in LA was we had a DJ come in for a staff party that we were having. And at the last minute, my backup, like I had this like Frank Sinatra type guy who was going to sing for the residents afterwards, and he canceled. And so I like called the DJ, or I went up to the DJ and I was like, can you stay for another hour? Like I have a whole happy hour planned for the residents, and I don't have any live music. And so he had never played for seniors before. And I was like, what do you play? I was like, just, I don't know, anything, the 70s, 60s, 50s, anything you can think of. And he ended up playing a lot of like Diana Ross and like kind of dance music, and they loved it. And I've actually never seen more of them get up and start like dancing. And they just had a blast, and they were all dancing together, and like, it was hilarious. I mean, like getting down, grooving, shaking their butts. It was wild. It was a rave, basically. Pretty much a rave. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So they were just a lot. If that had happened in Texas, I don't think they would have been up dancing like that. Maybe if it was like a Western band or something, but
Some
definitely
country.
People are a lot more lively in LA for sure.
I can kind of see that.
Yeah, we did go. There was a organization in Texas that kind of did like Make-A-Wish for seniors who were had terminal illnesses, and so the woman who I was telling you sat on like a doctor's lap. When at the end of her life, they actually rented out this really famous honky tonk in Austin.
That's fun.
And hired young guys to come in and dance with her. She was loving it, like wouldn't let this one guy go. Kissing them, getting her pink lipstick all over them. It was so funny. She had the time of her life. Yeah, she had the time of her life.
That's amazing.
Yep.
That was probably a scene.
Oh my gosh, it was so much fun. I know I still have videos on my phone from it because it was hilarious. I mean, they had a live band, a live country western band, and these like young, buff, like firemen looking dudes came in all dressed up in like their country pearl snap shirts and cowboy boots. So it was really cute. Yeah, the last thing I was going to say is that I do think, I've seen a lot of ads at the end of The Bachelor that they're trying to get a senior. They're looking for seniors now who are willing to do The Bachelor. Like, so for the last couple of Bachelor, Bachelorette seasons, they've been at the end, is there a senior in your life looking for love? So I think you will start to see, I know like on TikTok, there's places, Retirement House is a content house on TikTok of these old people who make content. I think you'll start to see more talk about this. I don't think it will be as taboo as time goes on, but I wouldn't be surprised if, we saw a season of The Bachelor with seniors. And I'll be tuning in every night for that one. So I would actually love to help cast that.
Dude, I don't know. I have a lot of thoughts on The Bachelor just because of it's just because of I feel like what I've heard of, producers, and I would just hope that the producers treat a senior a little bit differently than maybe someone our age that goes on the show.
Yeah, for sure.
But I do agree. I think it would be interesting to see seniors in like a dating and show environment that's not trash.
I could also see it kind of being the answer to, are people really there for the right reasons? Because I don't think, I don't want to make any, I don't want to, I guess, project my perceptions of seniors, but I don't think there's a ton of seniors out there looking to make a TikTok career, an Instagram career. I think most of them, if they were going on the show, would probably be just to have a good time or because their grandkids put them up to it or something. I have a snaking suspicion that Gabby's grandpa is going to be the Bachelor if they ever do it.
Is that someone on the show? I don't watch
Gabby
it.
was the Bachelorette the season that they had two Bachelorettes. It was Gabby and Rachel, and her grandpa was like, he came on the show a couple times and everybody loved him. So I think that he will be the Bachelor if they do a senior Bachelor. So when that happens, you can replay this podcast episode and, I'll give myself a pat on the back for that.
Just heard it here first. Yeah.
Insider information.
Yeah, For sure. Well, thanks, Allie, for coming on and sharing all of your knowledge on senior home living and dating with me and the listeners. I feel like this changed a lot of like perception I probably had. So I hope it helps some others as well.
Yeah, for sure. And if you're ever, thinking of putting your mom or dad or grandma and grandpa in a senior living community, make sure you send them with condoms,
Oh my God. And with that,
just kidding.